Hello and welcome to the second series of 3 lessons from Breakthrough Leaders with me, Zana Ryabchik, CEO at Breakthrough Global.
And with me, Bart Sale, founder of Breakthrough Global, where we've spent the past 30 years developing the Breakthrough methodology to help transform companies and people looking to reach their highest level.
And this podcast is all about giving you insider tips and the know-how from the world's foremost leaders and creative talents, distilling their knowledge and experience into 3 lessons, which we guarantee will help you and your companies to unleash your potential. And you can get in touch with us at bartsale@breakthroughglobal.com to find out more. In today's episode, we'll hear from Elizabeth Uviebinené. I first met Elizabeth at a female leadership conference, and I knew that we just had to get her on the show because there are so many synergies between the work that she's doing and the work that we do at Breakthrough. Elizabeth is a multi-award-winning author and she's a columnist at the Financial Times. She's published 5 books, including her critically acclaimed bestseller, Slay in Your Lane, The Black Girl Bible. And she's got a vision for a better working future with her book, The Reset, Ideas to Change How We Work and Live. She's now building Storia, a network-driven guided journaling app, and we'll talk more about that later in the show. So here are the 3 lessons that we'll learn from Elizabeth today. Why knowing your identity matters.
2 black girls from South London can write a book that speaks to thousands of people, and white men, black men, white women, that should tell you how powerful the themes around identity go deeper than just what meets the eye.
How to unlearn helplessness and use your personal power.
There's this conflict that I could see, and it didn't matter who I would speak to, whether it be, a senior leader or an intern or graduate, this real kind of conflict between how people want to work and how they're working.
You need a compass within the chaos.
In a world that tells us, focus on the self, we aren't collaborating, we aren't, checking upon each other in a meaningful way.
Lesson 1. It all starts with your identity. You have many strings to your bow. But for our listeners who may be less familiar with you and your story, can you walk us through your journey to where you are today?
I grew up in South London, in Peckham. My first work experience when I was 16 was at the Dulwich Picture Gallery, where I walked in and I essentially told, I explained that their marketing wasn't exactly super inclusive for young people and different ethnicities as well. And they took it on with good feedback and everything like that. And I ended up doing some posters and some design work and helping them with some of their events. So that was like my first work experience. So I always knew I loved marketing and I loved creativity, but once you finish university, you've got to have that straddle the realistic expectations with what you'd want to do. So I found myself working in a very large corporate firm in a bank, in a marketing function. Really enjoyed that. But I guess what I was experiencing at that time was what most people experience. You're still trying to find your feet in a very large organization and still trying to find yourself as well. So I, experienced microaggressions, things that I knew were influenced by the fact that I was young, I was black, and I essentially didn't really understand how to navigate these things. So I, read books, Sophia Amoruso Girl Boss, which was very popular at the time, and Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. And I was seeing that people were talking a lot about what it is to be a woman in the workplace. And that was super exciting because before then, I don't think that conversation was as prevalent, but correct me if I'm wrong. It just was a very cultural, it was a cultural moment, a cultural reset where people were talking about, women in leadership in very full force. And in my head, I was like, yeah, we're talking about women in leadership, but we're also talking about a particular kind of woman in leadership. How about black women in leadership? How about black women in a workplace? So I had this idea to write a book, but I didn't want to write it. So one thing about me, I'm great at delegating. So I...
Me too.
Yeah.
Part 2.
it's the best way. Sometimes it needs must. So I'm very good at having a strategic vision and big idea, and I need other people to help fulfill that. So my best friend, who's an amazing journalist, one of the best journalists in the country, Yomi Adeleke, I called her one lunchtime and I said, I know you want to write a book one day. I think your first book should be a book about the workplace for Black women. And she said to me, yeah, this is a fantastic idea. And she was on Google while I was saying this to her. And she was like, there's nothing like this exists. This is crazy. So yeah, long story short, she said to me, well, this isn't just going to be a book. It's going to be a movement. With your marketing brain and the way we can work together, we should do this together, and not just it be about work, but it be about all facets of a woman's life. So health and all those other areas. So that became Slaying Your Lane, the Black Girl Bible. And that was my first book. And I wrote that while working, actually.
I read that book.
Oh, thank you.
One of the things I saw there was, and you've probably been told this, that book is not just for Black women.
Yeah.
That book has things for everybody. But also I could identify with some of the things that you said, particularly when I was in the corporate world as a youngster.
But no, thank you for saying that, because I think that was our aim, but we didn't realize it was going to, it blew our expectations. We wrote this book for Black women. And I think the reason why you could identify with some of the challenge or some of the themes in the book, or the stories, is what I always say, which is one of the quotes people say, the more specific an experience, the more universal it is. And I think that is like so true when it comes to storytelling. I think a lot of the time we think that we're the only one going through something, but if two Black girls from South London can write a book that speaks to thousands of people, and white men, Black men, white women, that should tell you how powerful the themes around identity go deeper than just what it is, what meets the eye. So yeah, thank you for that.
What came to me listening to Elizabeth with this is that many young people, or anybody joining a company for the first time, usually spends a lot of time and energy trying to fit in, trying to belong. And what we saw from Elizabeth is that she decided to change things. Very courageous, a new job, and she wasn't afraid to give feedback and go beyond the feedback and show how things could be improved. And I think that stayed with her from that time.
You're right, Bart. When we think about our human needs, the need for belonging, but also the need to be unique and to be special, what happens when people join an organisation is that they want to belong, they want to fit in, they want to become part of the tribe. And what Elizabeth did was manage to break through that quite early on and hang on to her ability to be unique and to be special, and to utilise that for growth.
So for our listeners, one thing you can do is, when you go into work tomorrow, imagine that you're there for the very first time and look at the place with fresh eyes and see what comes up for you. Lesson 2, agency, autonomy, trust, emotion.
So I spent a few years out of the corporate world post Slaying Your Lane. I'd go to so many different workplaces, do so many different kind of like corporate speaking gigs, and the same themes were coming out around what people wanted to work like. There's this conflict that I could see, and it didn't matter who I would speak to, whether it be, a senior leader or an intern or a graduate, this real kind of conflict between how people want to work and how they're working. And I kind of realized there's this real kind of feeling that we don't have power and we don't have agency. And I know that not everyone can leave the workplace to become, to start their own business or write a book or any of those things. But people were crying out for autonomy, trust, agency, and empathy in how they worked. And they didn't say these things. No one said to me, I want more empathy. But the experiences that they were describing, the stories they would tell me, laddered up to some of these big themes. What I didn't want to write was another book about how the individual can work harder in order to reach their goals, but saying that we all need to work in unison. we all need to kind of feed into some of the key themes around agency, autonomy, trust, and that requires new types of leadership. That requires us to think about how we physically work. So our cities, so themes such as 15-minute city, themes such as co-working, how can we make better use of our working lives? Because we spend a lot of time at work. So for me, I wrote it to have a level of provocation on how the individual can see their work style a bit differently.
There's some great overlaps between the work that we do and everything you've just talked about. And I think one of the important overlaps is that we work with companies, we have a program that helps them transform their culture.
Mm,
And they come to us and we work with them, and it's really got a lot of business outcomes. But the program itself, when it was designed, it also had another part to it. And that was because I'd identified in my corporate life that a lot of people, they gradually became unfulfilled. And it's because of some of the things that you're saying. And they didn't feel, the word at the time was empowered. But I think what was happening is the very structure and nature and even the political system of the corporation really pushed people into what psychologists called learned helplessness. And so they felt that they had no autonomy, they had no agency, they didn't really have the power. So when we put the program together and as we've developed it, if you like, one of the mantras of our program is start with yourself.
yeah, exactly. And we've seen the power of many voices coming together as one. And a lot of the time you can feel that your work, you don't have control. And I'm not saying that everyone needs to be an activist in their workplace. I remember one time I was called an activist at work, and I was like, am I an activist? No, I'm not. I just have an understanding of what I want, and use my voice. And I think that people conflate being an activist with using your voice, because so many people feel that they don't have a voice. I remember one time I was saying to my manager back in the day, I was like, I was complaining about this, pushing through this piece of work that was just really difficult. And I was like, yeah, it's so hard to put, change and da 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 da. And then he said to me, Elizabeth, this place is not some sort of like dictatorship. Like it's people. The reason why you're struggling to kind of push through is because you're not understanding what people want. Everything comes down to people management, and all of these things, and have an understanding of how to help bringing people along the journey. Then it won't feel as if you're getting all these blockers. And that totally just switched. That changed my thinking, because I was like, you're right. This isn't a faceless person at the end of this email. This is a person who's probably a dad. This other person's probably a mom, probably a sister, probably a cousin. These are people just like me, and they need to be brought along the journey. And the way I do that is using my voice, using others. And so it just changed my understanding of things. And I think that a lot of the time we think that organizations are made up of robots, and no, they're made up of people, and people have at the core of them these fundamental human emotions.
Have you got some advice maybe for our younger listeners who are starting out in their career? What would that advice be?
So my advice would be, when you enter a new company or a new role or whatever it is, a new situation, a new project, be intentional about building relationships with people. Ask all the questions. Be super curious. People love talking about themselves. That's just us, as we're fascinated by ourselves as humans. So when you give people the opportunity to do that, they'll thank you for it in various ways. So that is a hack. Really spend time in building relationships. And secondly, understand what you want from every situation. No one's saying you've got to be a shark, but being able to be intentional about, I'm doing this role because it helps me do this next. Have that clearer idea in your head, because the world is changing and the only constant is change, as I always say. So knowing what you're leveraging to get to the next opportunity will hold you in good stead.
So here, Elizabeth is talking about her book, The Reset, where she identifies that by first changing ourselves, we can change culture. And by changing culture, we can shift business, community, our cities, and of course our societies. But it all starts with ourselves.
And what I like about Elizabeth in the podcast is she brings it down to the human level. And fundamentally, business is humanity. All business is about people. And we can sometimes forget that, being in conference rooms, seeing PowerPoints, seeing the business as a thing in itself. But ultimately, it's about you and me, it's about people. And Elizabeth really brings that out. Lesson 3, a compass in chaos.
I'd like to move on to the bit about kind of society and loneliness in your book, because you talk a lot about loneliness, its impact on health, depression, financial inequality, and even kind of suicide being the hidden cost of a world too busy to be a society was a phrase that really stuck out to me. It's something I think that can often get forgotten in the worrying about the work and individuals and sometimes even the fact that we're slightly better off individuals than the majority of people in our society, and it can all seem to get a little bit lost. So what are you working on now to help tackle this incredibly kind of intersectional issue?
Yeah, I definitely, everything you said is just, gosh, when I wrote that line, I can't even, it felt like I wrote, like you saying it, felt like I've heard it for the first time. I was like, oh no, I wrote that.
Yeah, you wrote that.
It's a great line. It's a great line.
Because it honestly, it made me like, I actually was like, oh raw, like I felt something when you said that. And I think that's the cost of like this drive of busyness and not looking at each other. And I think COVID obviously helped us to tap into our communities and people around us in a much more poignant way. So yeah, so currently I am building a startup that helps people write themselves better. Ultimately, that's the kind of mission and that's the ambition. And we're doing that through bringing people together and helping them express themselves in ways that they haven't been able to do previously. And how that feeds into this conversation around loneliness. It's that whole saying around, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I really think that in a world that tells us, focus on the self, self-care is all about you. And that's, there's a place for that 100%. However, I think we've gone way to the other extreme where we aren't collaborating, we aren't, checking upon each other in a meaningful way. And I think that if you look at the majority of like social media apps that are out there, it just drives us apart. There's a real divisiveness. Yeah, so for me, Storia is a real opportunity to bring people together in a meaningful way. Writing is super powerful. So it's like, how do we help people connect with themselves, but also connect with other people that are around them? So yeah, building this digital product is like, one of my it's the biggest challenge in my life, in a good way. I like rising up to challenges, but I think that it will hopefully answer questions around how we can do that as a people, because the world is crazy. It's it's intense, and we people at the heart of that in terms of like, how do we bring people together and how do we help them?
Elizabeth, you're a big journal user, as I am.
Yeah.
How does your journaling help you?
So journaling is something that has always just been the compass within my chaos. Writing helps me clarify my thoughts. It helps me work through certain emotions. And what I will say is, we have various acceptable emotions in our society. It's okay to be happy. Everyone wants a happy person. It's okay to be sad, but how about jealous? Is it obviously no one wants to be jealous. But it's a healthy emotion. Like, it's, when no one's saying, be envious, there's a difference. However, I think that if you have this pang of like jealousy, how do you articulate that to somebody? Because someone's going to think, oh my god, you're really weird. Why? And I understand that, but I don't say that. That's just one example of, we have acceptable emotions, and means that we don't get to talk about them and in a healthy way. So what I love about journaling and just writing really, you're able just to it's a relationship with yourself and you just say, I feel like this because of this. And you can be so honest. Like I always say, my journal harbors all my secrets and what I'm, and what I'm super honest about. And my mum. Like those are so my mom will not, like I can call her and just be like X, Y, Z, and she will just listen and she'll tell me I'm the greatest and everything like that. But I am so honest with her. Like I'm so honest with her. Like I will, like between her and my journal, they kind of give me that level of release.
It's inspiring to hear Elizabeth talk about how she uses the tool of journaling to help to mitigate loneliness and other challenges that she faces in her day-to-day life.
We all need to navigate through the chaos of life. And for that, you need navigational tools. You need to know where you are. You need to know where you're going. And then you can get a pathway to it. Elizabeth used journaling as one of her key navigational tools. And that's something that I do. I've got many journals spanning the years. And journaling for me has now become a form of meditation. So most mornings, as soon as I wake up, I'll grab a journal or a piece of paper and I'll just start writing, stream of consciousness. Sometimes I never go back to it, but the act in itself takes me from sleep to somewhere else. So I recommend that you take up some form of journaling. What it will do, it will ground you in the moment. It will give you insights. And in a way, it will plot your journey through life.
Elizabeth, it's time for your hot seat questions. These are our rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
What inspires you in life?
Being better every single day. However, like the thought of being a better person. But what inspires me is probably my nieces in order to do that, because I want to create a world where they are thriving and they can be the best version of themselves.
Oh, that's so nice. What brings you energy and motivation in your everyday life?
Coffee and my best friend Yomi.
And finish this sentence. Success is
Just being yourself. I just think that it's the greatest. Your superpower is the ability to know yourself and live that truth every single day, and have have people accept that. So yeah, that's what it'd be.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. This has been a joy and a delight to meet you, to listen to you particularly.
No, thank you.
And I've just got one message to our listeners out there. Buy her book, The Reset, now. And
Yeah.
if you've read it, read it again. The Reset by Elizabeth Uviebinené. And if everybody read this and started to use some of the insights and principles in it, we would already start to change the world of business.
No, thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you for joining us for today's 3 lessons. And of course, a big thank you to you, Elizabeth. Do make sure you hit the subscribe button and join us each month for 3 more lessons from breakthrough leaders.
And have you got a question or comment or want to find out more? You can email us at bartsale@breakthroughglobal.com or connect with us on LinkedIn at Breakthrough Global or on Instagram at Global Breakthrough.
We'd love to hear your own leadership stories, and we'd also love for you to share this episode on your own social media and review and rate this podcast on the player of your choice.
And so once again, thanks to Elizabeth, to our production team, Julia Scholtisova at Breakthrough Global and Rob Lieburn at Fairly Media. And of course, thank you for listening.